Today I'm going to talk about my favorite mechanism in Everdell. Everdell is a game that I got to play for the first time a few weeks ago. I do not own it, so I can't show it to you today, but most of the concepts I'll discuss today don't really need a visual. I have a few mechanisms I want to highlight here. Most of them are real quick little mechanisms in this worker placement game, worker placement card-driven game, and it has a little bit of both. And the first is that at the beginning of the game, you have these set action spaces that are always on the board, but you also have random action spaces that you put out. They're cards that you put on the board that create new action spaces. This is really, really cool. I've seen other games do this, but I want to highlight it because it really creates an interesting economy in the game that is variable from game to game. I like that while there are set action spaces so they can ensure that there's always place to get like wood or stone or whatever the core resources are, that there are also some other ones, limited action spaces, that change the economy a little bit. So I really, really like that. The second thing I like is how the game ramps up. So it's basically a 4-round game, actually 3 seasons, I believe. No, maybe 4. 3 or 4, doesn't really matter. It matters when you play it. But in the game, you don't start with many workers, and you put a bunch, you know that big tree, if you see the picture of this game, there's this big 3D tree. You put a bunch of workers at the top of that tree based on seasons. So whenever you pass into a new season, you grab some extra workers from that tree, and you have those workers from then on. What this does is that it creates this ramping effect where at the beginning of the game you're only placing a few workers in the first season, and so you're not doing a whole lot. You're placing workers. You can also play some cards on your turn. That's one of the 2 things you can do on your turn. But you don't have a lot of workers to get the resources to play the cards. So you're not really doing much the first season. You're doing a few satisfying things, but not a ton. And I think this really helps bring people into the game for the first time, or if they haven't played it in a while, because they're not overwhelmed right from the start. They only have a few things they can do. But by the end of the game, you feel super powerful because you have all these workers that you can use and all these cards that you can play and combos that are playing off those cards. This ramping effect is really, really satisfying. The last thing I wanted to mention, and I think actually just before I move on there, the key there is that you do not have access to those workers, those extra workers, until you enter those new rounds, those new seasons. So I think the game did a very clever thing there by holding back those workers until those rounds so that you do feel more powerful as the game progresses. The last thing is that the game has a lot of cards that you can play, and a lot of them combo off one another if you already have them in play. And a key way the game does this is that many of the cards have 2 different action costs to play them. So you can play a card, say, by paying 3 berries, or if you already have the berry picker card in play, you can just play the card. You can play the berry patch or whatever it is. This creates, I love in games when there's a push and pull between playing something now versus waiting to play it later based on something that you might get later that you're building up to playing. So it has this combo effect where I might be ready to play a card now, or I might be hoping to play a card now, but suddenly I see in the face-up card tableau, I see that berry picker card come up, and I know, okay, if I get that berry picker card, I can get that, I can play that, and then I can play this other card essentially for free because I already have the berry picker in play, which is very satisfying. So I really like this choice in this game, these dual action costs that play off of other cards that may or may not come up in the game, to give you an interesting choice as to whether or not I should play this card now or I should wait and have a satisfying free play later in the game. All 3 mechanisms really streamlined and elegant, but I think the designer did a great job at putting them into the game. And I created a very satisfying experience. I really look forward to playing this game again. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Everdell. If you have a favorite mechanism that I haven't mentioned, feel free to mention it in the comments. Or if any of these mechanisms remind you of another game that uses something similar that you really like or enjoy or want to comment on, I'd love to hear about that as well. Thanks.